Okay, so today we're going to ask those 4 questions that everyone should ask whenever they're looking to invest. So to start off with, imagine you have a lump of money. Doesn't really matter how much it is. It could be $10, it could be $10 million. But to make it practical and real, let's talk about a lump of $100,000. And let's imagine you're going to invest this in some paper products. It could be stocks or bonds or certificates of deposit or maybe options or futures. I'm going to talk generically about stocks because effectively they all work the same. And then we're going to compare investing that $100,000 in stocks with investing the same $100,000 in real estate. So the first question we have to ask when we get started in this process is, if you have $100,000 of cash, how many dollars of stock can you buy? And it's not a trick question. For most people, you can buy exactly $100,000 worth. Now, I know some people buy on margin, but what happens is if the price of those stocks come down, they do what's called a margin call, and you can only buy a certain number of stocks. And for most people, it doesn't work. Most people, when they have $100,000 cash, they can buy exactly $100,000 of stock. However, if we have that same $100,000 of cash and we want to buy real estate, well, first off, you could buy a $100,000 property. You'd just pay cash for it. But it's also possible to buy a $200,000 property using that $100,000 cash, and you'd get a mortgage from the bank for another $100,000. And similarly, you could buy a $300,000 property with $100,000 cash and a $200,000 mortgage. In fact, you could buy a $500,000 property with 20% down and an 80% mortgage, and you can even buy a property for $1 million using $100,000 cash and a $900,000 mortgage. And I know what some of you are thinking, a $900,000 mortgage, how am I ever going to pay the interest on it? And the answer is, you've got an asset worth $1 million that's generating rental income. If it doesn't cover the mortgage and the insurance and the maintenance and the property taxes, then you shouldn't be buying it. It is easy to buy a property for $1 million using $100,000 cash. So let's imagine if all the assets we buy go up by 10%. Your stocks will have gone from $100,000 to $110,000. You've made $10,000 or 10%. That's pretty good. But your real estate would have gone from $1 million to $1.1 million. You've made $100,000, or you've doubled your equity. And this is the power of leverage. Now, to be sure, leverage also works in the reverse direction, by which I mean if everything were to go down by 10%, your stock would have gone from $100,000 down to $90,000. You've only lost 10%, whereas your real estate would have gone from $1 million down to $900,000, and you will have wiped out your equity. But for reasons I'm happy to share, I'm not too worried about the value of real estate going down. It does go down in the short term, but then it surges again. When you look at the trend over the last 100 years, there have always been little mini peaks and mini troughs, but each peak is higher than the previous peak, and each trough is higher than the previous trough. The long-term trend is for real estate to go up. All right, so that brings us to question number 2. The moment you bought your investment XYZ, how much was it worth? So let's start off by considering our stock. We spent $100,000 of cash and we bought stock to the tune of $100,000. The question is, what is that stock portfolio worth the moment you buy it? And again, it sounds like a trick question, but it's not. You see, when you buy stock, you buy it on an electronic market. And whether you buy it yourself or through a brokerage, you pay the same price. In fact, you pay the same price whether you're in Chicago or Helsinki or Peru or down in Bolivia. It doesn't matter. Everyone pays the same price. So by definition, when you buy a $100,000 stock portfolio, it is worth exactly $100,000. So let's now ask the same question relative to our real estate investment. Remember, we spent $100,000 cash to buy a piece of real estate for a contract price of $1 million using a $900,000 mortgage. So the question is, the day you bought that property for $1 million, what was it worth? And it sounds like a trick question. It's not. It could be worth $1 million, but is it not possible that it's only worth $800,000 and you simply paid too much for it? Some fast-talking agent or seller talked you into paying more than it's worth. Yes, of course that's possible. It happens every day of the week. But by the same token, is it not possible that that property is worth $1.5 million and you just bought yourself a bargain? And the answer is yes, that happens every day of the week as well. And here's the deal. If you think that will never happen, if you think, why would anyone in his or her right mind sell a property worth $1.5 million for $1 million, then you'll never stumble across one, because if you do find one like that, you'll say, this sounds too good to be true. It can't be true. It's not true. I'm not going to take the risk. I won't do it. And you'll limit yourself to those deals worth either $1 million or maybe $800,000. These things do happen. There are many reasons why people sell a property cheaply. It could be that they're too stingy to engage the services of a broker because they don't want to spend the 3% and they miss out on $500,000. It could be a divorce situation or a fight or ignorance, or it's an absentee owner or an estate sale. It happens all the time, but it is possible to spend $100,000 on real estate. You acquire a property for a contract price of $1 million, and it's actually worth $1.5 million. So that brings us to question number 3. What can you personally do to increase the value of your $100,000 investment in XYZ? Well, let's start off by talking about stocks again. Remember, you spent your $100,000 cash buying a stock portfolio for $100,000. It was worth exactly $100,000 the day you bought it. What can you do to increase the value? And before you say, there's nothing I can do, can you not hope? Can you not pray? Can you not write letters of encouragement to the directors of these companies, hoping that these letters will put them in a good mood and they'll work harder and better and the value of the company will go up? Well, it's a long shot. In essence, there is nothing you can do. You're just going to wait and kind of hope that the value of the stock will go up. Let's compare that with real estate. So let's now ask the same question about real estate. You spent your $100,000 cash to buy a property for a contract price of $1 million using a $900,000 mortgage. It was actually worth $1.5 million when you bought it. What can you personally do to increase the value of this property? And folks, this is where the magic starts. There's a myriad of things you can do to massively increase the value. Just by painting a house, you can increase the value by way more than the cost of painting it. And if you've never spent $1,000 painting a house to increase its value by $20,000, then you've got to start spending your weekends in a different manner, because these things are possible. And here's the beauty of it. When you paint the house, you don't need to be the one doing the painting. You can pay someone else $400 or $600 to do it, whatever the going rate is in your area, and you'll still get that lift in value. And that's just one idea. In fact, I'm so passionate about that. I passionately believe that there are 101 things you can do to massively increase the value of your real estate without spending much money, and always being one to put my mouth where my money is, or my money where my mouth is. It doesn't matter after a while. I wrote the book on it. In fact, this is your chance to get a copy, because Chris and I are coming out with a new version of this book, and we've got some added ideas in it, and you can get your copy by clicking on the link below. And believe me, if you think it was easy to come up with 101 days, it wasn't. It was difficult. It was difficult to limit it to 101 ways because there are so many more. So that brings us to question number 4. Let's say your $100,000 doubles in value. How do you access it? Well, let's look at stocks first. Our stocks, we started with $100,000. It was worth $100,000. We couldn't do anything to change it. So when it doubles in value, it goes from $100,000 to $200,000. What must you do to access that money? And the answer is you have to sell. And to me, that seems counterintuitive. We invest in something to have it grow, but then the only way we can access it when it does grow is to stop the investment and to pull it out again. So in the case of real estate, you'll recall that we spent our $100,000 cash buying a property for a contract price of $1 million using a $900,000 mortgage, and it was actually worth $1.5 million the day we bought it. So what happens if that property doubles in value? We started at $1 million. Let's say it doubles in value to $2 million. The question becomes, how do we access the value? But the truth is, this isn't the right scenario. We had a contract price of $1 million. It was actually worth $1.5 million. So the question really becomes, this property started at $1.5 million and it doubled to $3 million. What do we do to access the value? Well, the answer is you could sell, although I'd not recommend it. In fact, I never recommend anyone sells. You'd pay a sales commission and capital gains tax. A far smarter thing to do is simply to refinance. You go back to the bank and say, Mr. Bank Manager, remember when you were reluctant to accept that this building was worth $1 million, let alone $1.5 million? Well, I have a new appraisal here from your appraiser that gives it a value of $3 million. Will you please give me a new mortgage? And what's he going to say? Banks are in the game of lending money to people like you and I, so he's going to say yes. And a 90% mortgage on a $3 million property is $2.7 million. You have to pay off the original $900,000 mortgage, of course. That leaves you with $1.8 million in cash. And ask yourself this question, is that $1.8 million taxable? Well, it's not earned income, so there's no income tax on it. It's not the sale of something, so there's no sales tax or capital gains tax. It is tax-free money in your hands. And what do you do with that 1.8 million? How about we use it as a 10% down payment on another $18 million worth of property? So now you've got 18 million plus the 3 million from this original. We're at $21 million. And here's the true answer. When you invest your $100,000 in stocks, you can double it and end up with $200,000. Whereas when you invest that same $100,000 in real estate, you can go to $21 million. That is why I love real estate. So we've just gone over the 4 questions that I think everyone should always ask whenever they consider any investment. And for me, it's a great reminder as to just why real estate is so good. And I ask you, how good does real estate have to be before you really want to get involved? And while these covered the why, there is also the how. And Chris Crone and I have just re-released this book of mine, 101 Ways to Massively Increase the Value of Your Real Estate Without Spending Much Money. And you can get your copy free of charge by clicking on the link below. Because at the end of the day, when you understand how to do this and you can implement it, that is when your life will change. So click the link below to get your free copy of this book. Thank you so much for watching this video. It's been my real pleasure. I started the real estate game at the age of 17, and I ended up spending 8 years at university getting a PhD in electrical engineering, but then I never worked a day as an engineer because I loved the real estate game so much. I asked you 4 questions. If you have any questions for me, comment them below. Hit the subscribe button. I look forward to seeing you again soon.